Hello, guys, and welcome to the BA Sports Podcast. It is the Week 5 preview, and we just saw the Rams lose to the Niners in overtime. I am 0 for 1 to start off the week on my picks, but Kyron Williams looked good. Puka Nacua looked good. Devontae Adams, wish he would have gotten in the end zone. He looked good as well. Matthew Stafford looked fantastic, but Mac Jones, my goodness, with the weapons around him, he just stayed strong in there even after the injuries. And man, he pulled it off, and the Niners won that game by 3 points. Huge win for the Niners, going 3-0 now in their division. So big win for the Niners on Thursday Night Football. Let's kick off week 5. We're going to go into some start sits, sleepers, and busts for week 5. Then we're going to go into some daily fantasy targets and fades. And then we're going to go around the league, every game preview. And we have 4 teams on bye this week, y'all. The Falcons, the Bears, the Packers, and the Steelers all on bye. So this hopefully will help you with streaming positions because I know it is very, very tight out there right now. People are looking at the Cardinals backfield. People are looking at the Panthers backfield. People are looking at the Houston backfield. There's a lot of backfield shakeups right now, injuries, and places you can take advantage of. And there are some matchups you want to avoid this week when it comes to the running back position. So let's get started with some starts right now. It's going to be quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. I'm going to fire some of them off right now. Justin Fields is my start of the week. He is gonna follow in Jordan Love's footsteps, who was my start of the week last week. So week 1, Jalen Hurts was QB8 against this Cowboys defense. Russell Wilson QB2, and then week 3, Caleb Williams QB1, Jordan Love QB6 last week. They are number 1 most fantasy points allowed. The Cowboys defense is, and I think Fields looks great. I started him last week in place of Kyler Murray, and his rushing floor makes it super viable for him as a starting quarterback for your fantasy football team. I would lock him in as a top 5 quarterback this week, and I believe I have him quarterback 4 this week behind, I think it's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and then Justin Fields. Let me make sure for, yep, that's it. That's exactly how I have it right now. And yeah, so I think Justin Fields should be locked in your lineup. I like Brees Hall in this game as well. I like Garrett Wilson. I also like, as a sleeper, we can get into him later, Mason Taylor, the tight end who saw an increase in targets, season high in targets. I'll get into him in the sleeper section. Running back start is going to be David Montgomery. Now, I know he had a bad game last week, but that is solely due to that Cleveland Browns run defense, who I am looking to avoid this week. And I will tell you why in my bust section. And Cincy's defense is not Cleveland's defense. We saw RJ Harvey and JK Dobbins thrive against this defense last week, and I expect the same from Gibbs and Monty. Lock in Monty as an anytime touchdown scorer this week. They have allowed 6 touchdowns in the last 4 games to running backs. It is RB2 flex play, I'd say. He's my RB17, David Montgomery, on the week. Thank you guys for joining the live. And let's answer some questions really quick. J5 says Dak or Fields. I'm going Justin Fields this week, J5. I think that he should be locked in your lineup as a QB1 this week. So go with Justin Fields. Now, let's get into the wide receiver position. It is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. with Trey Benson put on IR. They are leaning on Amari DiMercado and Michael Carter. I'm not sure which one is going to lead the way. They've gone back and forth. They're not really saying, it's just a toss up in that backfield. There's no true winner from this Trey Benson to IR injury. It just kind of, I think the real winner is the passing game. The 6th most fantasy points allowed to opposing receivers, Tennessee does. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. should lock in after last week against a pretty tough Seattle defense. We saw him come alive in that second half. I think he's a solid wide receiver 2 flex play. He is my wide receiver 24 on the week. So I think you can lock in Marvin Harrison Jr. as a starter. I expect him and Kyler to keep on the same page as they did last week in that second half against the Seahawks. Another question from Aiden. Should I start Judkins or Chase Brown? I am going to go Quinshawn Judkins on that one, Aiden. Thanks for liking. And now let's move into the tight end position. Keeping in that Cincinnati and Detroit game from my David Montgomery start to now start Sam Laporta. Since he's been bad, dating back to last year, they've been bad against tight ends. Last year, they were the number one team, number one in fantasy points allowed to the position. And this year, they are fifth most points allowed to the tight end position. And Sam Laporta hasn't looked great in recent weeks, but I think he gets back on track here against a good matchup. He is my tight end 4 on the week. I think that this game could be a sneaky shootout if Jake Browning can push this Detroit defense, who hasn't really done that well against the pass. So I think Jake Browning, with his two weapons in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, has the opportunity here to push this game and kind of make it a shootout, which I think will help the Lions and the Bengals fantasy managers with David Montgomery, Sam Laporta, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Jameson Williams. I think Amon Ra gets there again this week. I liked Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs last week the most. I did not like David Montgomery as much, and I did not like Sam Laporta as much, but I am in on them this week. So start both Sam Laporta and David Montgomery. Another start I like is Tetairoa McMillan. I think the rookie has struggled early on, but I think he gets back on track here in this one. And Bryce Young is going to look to him early and often. I believe they got to get him on track and get this passing game going, especially if Chuba Hubbard's out. They're going to have to lean on Rico Dowdle, which he's the backup running back. They're going to have to get Tetairoa McMillan going. He hasn't got going. They didn't look great last week. They looked good in the 30-0 shutout of the Falcons, but they didn't really need him in that game. So hopefully Tetairoa McMillan gets going. I am firing him up this week. And now let's go into some sits. Geno Smith leads off the quarterback position as a sit for me. I don't like what I've seen from him over the past couple of weeks. Will they need to throw against Indianapolis? I'm not so sure. They may lean on Ashton Genty, and I believe Geno Smith is a risky start. But we did see Stafford, who just put up great numbers on Thursday Night Football. He made the most of this matchup last week against the Colts. So Geno Smith definitely has potential to bounce back, and it will help him if their cornerback is out. Their slot cornerback is out. I'm not positive. It's not confirmed yet, but it's looking like he may be out. So that will help Geno Smith to Jacoby Myers connection if the slot cornerback is out. And running back Jordan Mason is on my sit list. This is exactly why I wasn't a fan of David Montgomery last week. It is the toughest matchup for running backs in the league. Now, I believe Jahmyr Gibbs was able to get there just solely due to his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield in PPR leagues. I'm worried about Jordan Mason, though, because he does not really do that. We saw Xavier Scott was more so that back last week against the Steelers. Now, luckily, they don't have to travel to Europe. They're already in Europe. But I'm still worried about Jordan Mason against this Cleveland Browns defense, who allow a league low 12.9 half PPR fantasy points per game to running backs. They're also allowing only 70 rushing yards to backfields. And Jahmyr Gibbs is the only back who really hasn't struggled, and he only scored 17.7 PPR fantasy points. Chase Brown, Derrick Henry, and Jacobs were all held to under 2.1 yards per carry against this defense. You can check out the Fantasy Pros article for studs and duds this week in week 5. If you go on the Fantasy Pros website, I wrote about Jordan Mason and why you should avoid him. And I also wrote about Mason Taylor and why he could be a sleeper this week for your fantasy teams. All right, guys, let's move into Calvin Ridley, the sit of the week at the wide receiver position. I'm just not trusting this offense in general. 54% snap count last week for Calvin Ridley. I would drop him if someone better is available. The situation is very bad with the play calling. Cam Ward, as he stated, they are not very good. So they are very booty, according to Cam Ward. And let's get into some questions really quick. Kyron popped off. Yes, he did. I'm glad he did. I started him. I would start Jacoby Myers. Even though I don't like Geno Smith, I still think Jacoby Myers gets there. And I just think there are better options at quarterback. Wide receivers kind of slim this week, so that's why I would start Jacoby Myers instead of Geno Smith. Um, Now, if you have to start Geno Smith, I'm fine with it because he has a decent matchup, but he's just been struggling, and surely he's going to get on track one of these games. But I love Jacoby Myers this week. I think his matchup is primed to go off, and it's a lot easier to put up more points as a wide receiver opposed to a quarterback, unless the quarterback is throwing touchdowns or yardage, and Geno Smith really hasn't been doing either. Lamar. I have Jamar. Jamar for Keenan, Harrison, and Kamara. They have Achane and McCaffrey. I would uh I would try and see if you can get McCaffrey and Keenan instead of the three, or Achane and Keenan. All right, guys, let's keep going on these sits. So, first off, on the sit, tight end position, Isaiah Likely. I am not a huge fan of Cooper Rush is going, which I think he is. 46% snap percentage in the first week back for Isaiah Likely. Bad matchup. And I know you may have stashed him in a league, but I think he is droppable. If Mason Taylor or Tommy Tremble are out there, I'd rather roster them this week for their matchups. And honestly, I think the over-under in those games is probably a lot higher than the Ravens and Texans games. Texans defense has been tough, and especially against tight ends. I believe they're like seventh in most, or seventh best in least fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. So Isaiah Likely, he saw less snaps than Mark Andrews. How many snaps is he going to get this week? It's only his second week back. I don't see him getting a lot of snaps. Maybe he gets into the end zone, but you're banking on him scoring a touchdown and saving your fantasy day. I'd rather go with a guy who's going to get more volume in Mason Taylor or Tommy Tremble, just because they don't really have guys that are going to take them off the field. And then flex position, another sit, wide receiver position. Christian Gonzalez matchup for Keon Coleman. The Bills will go elsewhere if Christian Gonzalez is locking up Keon Coleman, which I expect him to. And they got Shakir, they got Kincaid, they got James Cook. They also have Josh Allen. So they have plenty of weapons to do so, and they don't have to lean on a wide receiver like Keon Coleman. That is the perk of having all these weapons for Josh Allen. He can pick and choose who he wants to throw to, but I don't think Keon Coleman gets it done this week. The Patriots defense is sneaky good, and I think they're just starting to gel. And I think it's going to be a hell of a game on Sunday Night Football, honestly. I think we're going to get Drake May performing well against this Bills defense, who allow one of the most, if not the most, I think, rushing yards to the quarterback position. So it's going to be a fun game on Sunday Night Football, but I am sitting Keon Coleman. So let's go into the sleepers. And this sleeper is kind of surprising after his recent performance. He really hasn't put up top one QB1 numbers. He's only his highest finish has been QB 14, and that's Jake Browning. And that was against Jacksonville. The Lions' pass defense, though, they just haven't been great. Joe Flacco just got benched after the Browns' performance against this Lions defense. And I think the Bengals bounce back at home in this one. He's got weapons to do so in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Noah Fant is there. Chase Brown's there. Now, the real question is, can this offensive line hold up long enough for Jake Browning to get the ball off and get it to his weapons? I'm not sure. That's the one question I am very unsure of. But if you're in a tight position, I am not mad about streaming Jake Browning this week. I think he can have the potential to do really well at home against this Lions defense, who are close to dead last in points allowed to the wide receiver position. And yeah, I think this game could be a sneaky shootout. So sleeper, Jake Browning. Another sleeper, running back Woody Marks, slowly increasing his snaps weekly. He finally made that payoff last week. The number one waiver claim in all leagues this week. He should be a RB2 lock in your lineup. I have him as a top 24 running back against the Ravens, who are ranked dead last against the running back position in points allowed. They also are allowing the most points total this year as a defense. So I think the Texans can push here. I think the Texans could win this game without Lamar Jackson on the Ravens side. The only thing they're going to have to lean on, if I'm the Ravens, I'm leaning on Derrick Henry, which they have not done. And I think that's why they've lost them games recently. The past two games, they probably could have won if they would have just given the ball to Derrick Henry, another sleeper. And this solely depends on if Chuba Hubbard is out. So monitor the injury status. But this guy, I am starting over both the Arizona running backs and both the Tampa running backs. So you got Bucky Irving's injury. You got Rachaad White and Sean Tucker on the up and up. People looking to add them. You have Trey Benson going on IR. You have Emari Demercado and Michael Carter, the two running backs for Arizona. People are looking to add them, but no one's really talking about Rico Dowdle. If Chuba Hubbard is out, they are going to lean on Rico Dowdle like he is Chuba Hubbard. He is not one of those split backfield type backs. We saw him rush for 1,000 yards last year with the Dallas Cowboys. And now I think he's better than all four of those Cardinals and Bucks running backs. So he has a good matchup as well. Miami allows the 10th most fantasy points to the running back position. So if Chuba is out, I would definitely look for Rico Dowdle getting a large role in this game and them trying to get the ground game going with him. And I like him a lot as a sleeper this week. He will probably be my top sleeper if Chuba is out. Wan'Dale Robinson is my wide receiver sleeper. No neighbors. Got a great matchup against the Saints. And I think Dart's going to go to him and Slayton, especially. So I would put Wan'Dale in your lineup as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 flex play this week, especially with all these buys. Wide receiver position is a little tough this week. Tight end sleeper Darren Waller, 2 touchdowns in his Miami Dolphins debut last week. With Tyreek Hill out for the year, they need someone else to step up. They're going to be looking for Jalen Waddle, Malik Washington, Darren Waller. They're going to need those guys to step up in Tyreek Hill's absence for the rest of the year. And he has a great matchup against Carolina, who allow a lot of points to tight ends. So Darren Waller, I'm comfortable streaming him as a top 12 tight end this week. And I think he can get into the end zone once again this week. Let's go into our last sleeper, wide receiver, Jameson Williams. The Cincinnati defense has not been good. Jared Goff is my QB 5 on the week. And I believe Jameson, yes, he has. Jameson has scored most of his fantasy points against zone defense. That is good news because the Bengals deploy zone at 68% of the time. And I believe, last week he saw 8 targets, only caught 2 of them. I think he wants to get on track this week. Him and Goff need to get on track, especially we saw Goff get on track with the Amon-Ra with Gibbs last week, but they're going to need the offense, honestly, full go this week. I'm honestly liking all of the Lions starters, but Jameson Williams, low end wide receiver 3, more of a boom bust play, but he is one of my top sleeper flexes of the week. Now, before we go into the bust section, let's answer some questions we're getting from the chat. So, guys, what is going on in the chat? So, offered Bucky for Derrick Henry. We don't know how long Bucky's going to be out. I think I would rather just hold on to Henry because they're going to have to lean on him over the next couple of weeks until we hear more about the Bucky injury, maybe this weekend. Start at flex, Charbonnet, Mason, or Godwin. I'm going to have to go Godwin on that one, G-Money. Charbonnet gets a tough matchup. I'm about to talk about why Kenneth Walker is my bust of the week. Yes, you should start JSN this week. I don't see why you wouldn't. He's a top 5 wide receiver, maybe top 3. Thank you guys for liking. Thank you guys for joining the live. We're about to get into this bus. Just a couple. Oh, what a start. Caden said started born. Fantastic start, Caden. Great job. You had more confidence in the Niners pass game than I did. No, I didn't. I didn't really want to start a Niners wide receiver this week, but hey, Kendrick Bourne stepping up when it matters most. All right, one last question, guys. Demercado or Charbonnet? I'm going to lean Emari Demercado. Jets or Cowboys? For the game, I'm picking the Cowboys, but either defense, I'm not playing either of them. Hey, Julian, if all those guys are hurt, fantastic play. Great stream. Yeah, fantastic stream. If he's the only guy, hey, you got to do it, and it paid off. That's why you have to pull some of the triggers and make some of the tough calls of starting a guy like Kendrick Bourne, who just goes off this week for the 49ers in Pearsall, Jennings absence, and Kittle's out too. So that helped him a lot. Now let's get into the bust section, and we'll get back into the questions in a little bit after the busts. Quarterback Bo Nix is my bust of the week. Tough matchup at Philly. Now, these bust calls are not necessarily must sits. They're just more so caution and expect a little downgrade in their performance. They're not going to perform well. These are guys I'm projecting. You don't have to sit them. Most of these guys are starters, but I would caution against them. And if you have better options, definitely look to those better options. Bo Nix, tough matchup at Philly. He has not looked great so far this year. Quarterback 27 against Tennessee, quarterback 12 at Indianapolis, quarterback 19 at the LA Chargers, and quarterback 5 last week against the Bengals at home. His only top 10 quarterback finish of the week. Baker is the only quarterback to eclipse 200 yards passing against Philadelphia. I expect the Broncos to get the ground game established to try and control the clock, try and keep possession away from Philly, and play the game that Philly likes to play against opponents. So I'm a little worried for Bo Nix this week. This Philly pass defense is legit. We've seen over the first couple weeks. Now, Baker did expose them last week, but he threaded the needle on a 77-yard touchdown to Emeka Egbuka, which was such a great throw. And I'm not so sure Bo Nix is going to be able to do that. When I've been watching Bo Nix this year, I just haven't seen him make plays like Baker Mayfield's been making this year. So I'm a little cautious about starting Bo Nix this week. He is my bust at the quarterback position. Running back. This is why I don't like Ken Walker and I don't like Zach Charbonnet this week. Now, I am having to start Ken Walker in one league, and I have more confidence in Ken Walker than Zach Charbonnet solely due to his pass catching ability. The Bucs run defense is elite, though, and I don't see Kenneth Walker and the Seahawks putting an end to it. They held Saquon to the lowest total on the year. He was my bust last week, but he got into the end zone. But no running back has eclipsed 50 rushing yards. They are number one in the NFL in rushing yards per game, 54 yards per game allowed to running backs, which the only way that I think Ken Walker gets going is through the pass game. Now, maybe this outside zone scheme can do a good thing for them and get out of them having to run straight up the middle towards Vita Vea. Maybe they can get Ken Walker on the outside and win that way. But this Bucs defense is very stout against the run. So that's why I have Ken Walker as my running back bust of the week. And then wide receiver wise, Brian Thomas Jr., bust of the week. I'm tired of starting him, even though he did have the best performance he had all year was last week, 10 fantasy points. He hit double digits finally, but Kansas City gets exposed more so on the ground than through the air. So I'm a fan of Travis Etienne. Bashal Tutin's kind of a sleeper this week. I think the Jags get going on the ground as opposed to through the air. So that is why Brian Thomas Jr. is a bust. And then tight end David Njoku. I don't know if you were thinking of starting Njoku just because Dylan Gabriel is maybe targeting him more, but Dylan Gabriel at quarterback in a bad matchup. I don't love this for David Njoku. And Fannin outsnapped Njoku last week barely. It was 85% to 84%. But I am betting on Harold Fannin Jr. I'd like to see him and Dylan Gabriel get going, the two youngins, and kind of rejuvenate this Browns offense with all the young talent with Dylan Gabriel, Quinshon Judkins, and Harold Fannin Jr. And then we could see Isaiah Bond get going. I'm just not liking Njoku this week, so I am trying to sit him if I can. I would rather play Mason Taylor. I would rather play Tommy Tremble over him this week. That is going to do it for the start, sit, sleepers, and busts. And let's get into the DFS targets and fades just after some questions for the listeners. Flex Egbuka, Pittman, JCM, or Judkins. If it's a PPR league, I am leaning Pittman for the flex. And if it is half PPR standard, I am leaning Judkins. Ladd or Brown? Which Brown? Marquise Brown, AJ Brown. If it's Marquise Brown, I'd go Ladd. If it's AJ Brown, I would go Ladd as well. AJ Brown's about to be taken to Pat Surtain Island. Pat Surtain showed up last week and took Jamar Chase to the island. I think AJ Brown's getting taken to the island. Ladd McConkey, I know he's underperformed this week, but this matchup is fantastic. The Commanders can't stop anything through the air, and I think you've got to play him here. If he doesn't perform here, I'm fine with doing whatever you want next week, but I don't like the matchup for AJ Brown. Yeah, I like that. I like Justin Herbert in daily fantasy this week. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you guys for liking. So, daily fantasy, some cheap plays at the quarterback position. Bryce Young, he's pretty cheap. And then you got Jackson Dart, who's also relatively cheap. Woody Marks and David Montgomery are relatively cheap at the running back position. Um, I don't know if I'm willing to play either of them, but it's a little risky. Wide receiver wise, Michael Pittman Jr. and Lab McConkey are some pretty cheap plays you can get away with this week. Jacoby Myers is another wide receiver that I like. And then tight end, Kate Otten, Mason Taylor, Tommy Tremble. Those three headline it for me. And then big fades at the running back position, Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker. Not trying to start them this week. Some other quarterback plays I like for daily fantasy. I like Justin Fields. I like Justin Herbert. And then I like Jackson Dart. Um, I think you can throw a dart at your DFS lineup and just bet on his rushing upside for Jackson Dart against this New Orleans Saints defense. So I like that for this week at DFS. Some running back plays I like. I like Devon Achane this week. I like Rico Dowdle as a cheaper play if Chuba Hubbard is confirmed out. And then Tedero McMillan could be a sneaky wide receiver play this week. George Pickens, Garrett Wilson definitely should be headlining your lineups this week at the wide receiver position. And then tight end wise, I like Jake Ferguson, Mason Taylor, Tommy Tremble. Cade Otton's a little more of a dart throw. Not really sure what to expect from that Tampa Bay offense, but Tampa Bay, they are facing a Seattle Seahawks defense who allows a lot of points to the tight end position. So I like Cade Otton, and I think he could benefit from having a good matchup solely due to the Seahawks trying to shut down Emeka Egbuka, Chris Godwin, and we'll see what running back gets out there for the Bucks. And now, before we go into around the league with the rapid game hits, let's get into some more questions. Would you go Allen and Gibbs for Baker, Hubbard, and Egbuka? No, I'm not willing to give up Jameer Gibbs for that package, especially with Chuba Hubbard nursing an injury. Just traded Egbuka for Collins. Yeah, that's a good trade. Sell high on Egbuka. I like that. Theo, Ertz, or Hawkinson. Um, I'm gonna go. Oh man, that's tough. I'm gonna go Theo Johnson. Woody or Judkins? I'm going Judkins. Do you start AJ Brown or Michael Pittman? I'm going Michael Pittman. I have Michael Pittman ranked higher than AJ Brown this week. Judkins over Woody. All right, let's go around the league. Starting off with another early game. This one's in London. Vikings staying in Europe and facing the Browns. Minnesota is favored by -3.5. Over under is 36.5. This game is going to have defense, and more defense. I feel bad for all the people in England having to watch this game, but it might be a snooze fest and you guys wake up and watch the early slate that starts at 1 p.m. Eastern because this Vikings Browns game could be a snooze fest. Start Quinshawn Judkins, fade Jordan Mason are my two. That is my start and my fade for this game. I like Quinshawn Judkins this week solely due to he's getting all the touches. He had a bad matchup last week and he took full on advantage of it and got most of the carries. They were in a trailing game script, which I cautioned in starting him last week, and that was a mistake on my part. I will not caution against starting him here. I know he may have a bad matchup on paper. The Vikings defense has been relatively good, but he had one last week, and he is seeming to prove me that he's matchup proof. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Pickens and Chase Brown for Garrett Wilson, a W trade. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'd want just a little bit more, like another running back, but I like Pickens. I just don't like Chase Brown. So Garrett Wilson could be a good one. I like that. Wandale or Chase Brown rest of season. I'm gonna go Chase Brown. Goff for Cincinnati. All right, guys, let's keep going. Raiders at Colts. Start Jacoby Myers, fade Geno Smith. And I'm only saying fade Geno Smith is because I couldn't really choose another person to fade. I like Daniel Jones. I like Michael Pittman. I like Jonathan Taylor. I like Tyler Warren. I like pretty much everyone, but I mean, I guess I could say fade Trey Tucker, but I just don't. I think there are better options at quarterback, which is why I'm looking to fade Geno. If you don't want to fade Geno, fade Trey Tucker. But Jacoby Myers is the wide receiver you want to start this week in this game, especially him and Michael Pittman. Indy's favored by -6.5, over unders 47.5. This is in Indianapolis, and I think the Colts could win this one by a comfortable margin. Now, do we see a Geno Smith game and he finally performs? Maybe. But I am fading him this week. I think there's better options out there like Jackson Dart. Now, speaking of Jackson Dart, that is the next game on the slate. Giants at the Saints. New Orleans is favored by -1.5, over unders 40.5. The Saints are at home. And I am starting Alvin Kamara and I'm fading the Saints defense. I think the Giants can win this game, but Jackson Dart's going to have to perform at a high level. They're going to need Cam Scatterboo on the ground this week. I think they're going to try and lean on him a lot. Now, no Malik Neighbors, that definitely hurts them, but I am not starting the Saints defense against this Giants offense. I like the Giants defense a lot more in this game, just solely due to their pass rush that they can really, with all four of those guys on the front line, like they can just come at you at different ways. And I like the Giants defense as a streaming option this week. Next up, Cowboys at Jets. Probably one of the better games today or on Sunday. Dallas -2.5, over unders 47.5. I would start Justin Fields. And then I'm fading both defenses. Do not want to start either defense in this matchup. I think this one is going to be run up the scoreboard as we saw last week with Green Bay and Dallas, 40-40 finish, scoreagami. But yeah, you're starting Justin Fields this week. You're starting Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, Jake Ferguson, and Dak Prescott. You're starting all of them. And then Mason Taylor, sleeper tight end this week. And then the Broncos at the Eagles is the next one. Philly is -3.5. Over under is 43.5. I am starting Devontae Smith. It's going to be Sertan Island. So I am a little cautious about starting AJ Brown this week, but I like Devontae Smith. And then I'm fading Bo Nix this week. Like I said earlier, I do not like this matchup he has with the Eagles defense, but I'd love to see the Broncos defeat the Eagles this week. So hopefully that happens. Next up, Dolphins at the Panthers. Miami is favored by -1.5 in Carolina. Over under is 44.5. I am starting Tedero McMillan this week, and I'm a little cautious about starting Jalen Waddle. So I am fading Jalen Waddle, even though he is taking over almost all the targets now that Tyreek Hill is gone. I think JC Horn is going to be locked up on Jalen Waddle. Now, if JC Horn doesn't travel with Jalen Waddle, that definitely benefits him. But I don't see why they wouldn't stick JC Horn on Jalen Waddle. They have no one else to throw to in that offense besides Darren Waller and Malik Washington. And I'd rather have those two try and beat me than Jalen Waddle try and beat me. So I believe the Panthers' focus is going to be to shut down Jalen Waddle and shut down Devon Achane. Now, I'm not sure how they're going to be shutting down Devon Achane, but I think they can shut down Jalen Waddle as they've shown. They've gotten exposed on the ground, which is why I think their pass defense is so much better this year. But JC Horns performed really well this year, and I expected to keep it going, and I'm fading Jalen Waddle. And Texans at the Ravens. Houston is favored by -1.5 in Baltimore. Over under is 39.5. I am starting Woody Marks and I'm fading Zay Flowers. I'm just not a fan of Cooper Rush running this offense. I think they're going to have to lean on Derrick Henry to beat this Houston defense. The Houston Texans pass defense has been elite, especially with Devin Singletary. Derek Stingley Jr. Devin Singletary is a running back. Derek Stingley Jr. has been elite at the cornerback position, and I believe they're going to try and match him up with Zay Flowers this week a little bit, the wide receiver 1 for Baltimore. So we'll see how Zay Flowers handles this, but I am fading him this week. Next up in the afternoon slate, Titans at the Cardinals. Arizona is -7.5. And then the over-under is 41.5. I am starting Marvin Harrison Jr. and I'm fading Calvin Ridley. I'm also starting the Cardinals defense this week. I like the Cardinals running backs, they're great and all. I just don't know which one's going to get the touches. I'm starting Amari DiMercado in one league, and then I had Michael Carter, but I dropped him to pick up Rico Dowdle in another league, and I might start Rico Dowdle depending on Chuba Hubbard's injury status. But I think the Cardinals beat the Titans here in Arizona. That line -7.5 is pretty large, but the Titans haven't looked good, and I think their coach is so close to getting fired. Next up, Bucks at the Seahawks. Start Cade Otton. He is my sleeper of the week. Like I said earlier, Seattle struggles against tight ends, so I like him a lot. This week, start Cade Otton, fade Kenneth Walker, fade Zach Charbonnet. Like I was talking about earlier, this Bucks run defense is elite. And even though Seattle is favored by -3.5, I think the Bucks could push that, but I do expect Seattle to pull it out at home, and this one solely due to their defense. And then next up, this one could be a barn burner. Over under is 49.5. Detroit is favored by 10.5. It is the Lions at the Bengals. I'm starting David Montgomery, starting Sam Laporta, and I'm fading Chase Brown in this one. Now, the Lions' run defense is very good, but the only way Chase Brown makes up for this is his role in the PPR passing game. If you're in a standard league, I would have a tough time starting Chase Brown, but Chase Brown, I would definitely fade this week. I think Jamar Chase could get going. I think T. Higgins could get going in this one, but it's tough to be starting Chase Brown, even though you may have to this week. I know I have to in one league. So it really depends on your situation if no one out there is better. And then Commanders at the Chargers. LAC is favored by -2.5 at home against the Commanders. Over unders 47.5. I am starting Keenan Allen, and I am fading Jacory Krosky Merritt. I don't like the way they're splitting this backfield, but after this week, if we don't get a good game from JCM, I think you can buy low on Bill because his matchups over the next couple weeks after this are very favorable. So I'm fading him this week, but I'd be open to starting him later on. They got to get him going. He looks like one of the best runners on the field for this Commanders offense. So I I'm fading him this week, but he is a stash for me. And then let's get into Sunday night and Monday night football. Sunday night football, Patriots at Bills. Buffalo is favored by -7.5. Over unders 49.5. I am starting Travion Henderson. The Bills have not been great against the run, and I think this is the game that Travion Henderson breaks out on prime time with Drake May, and Buffalo favored by -7.5. They're obviously expecting the Patriots to lose this game. So I really like the spot for Travion Henderson this week. I think he's a solid flex play, RB2 play if you have to. I know running back position this week may be a little thin for you with all these injuries to Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving. You may not have a better option. So I'm fine with starting Travion Henderson as an RB2 flex play this week. And then I'm fading the Patriots defense just because I think this game is going to be a shootout. So does Vegas. The over-under is 49.5. I'm not starting the Patriots defense this week, but they could be a good defense going forward as a streaming option. The last game of the slate for week 5, Chiefs at Jaguars. Kansas City is favored by -3.5, over unders 46.5. I am starting Travis Etienne. Like I said earlier, Kansas City's been bad against the run. So I think Travis Etienne has a prime spot for them to lean on him in this matchup. And then fading Brian Thomas Jr. this week. Like I said, he just hasn't been getting it done. Now, if you have to start him, you have to start him. But he is one of my bust wide receivers of the week. So that is going to do it for all the starts and the fades for every single game. So before we wrap this episode up, we're going to go into listener questions for the next couple minutes, and then we're going to end it for the week 5 preview. We went over some starts, sits, sleepers, and bust, talked about some daily fantasy options, and then went around the league game by game, gave you a start and fade for every game, and a little bit of info with what I think is going to happen. You can look out for more info on the weekly matchup analysis out on X every Saturday. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, let's get into some listener questions really quick. Start Stroud, Nix, or Dart. I am going to go Jackson Dart. Woody Marks, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, pick 2. I'm going to go Travis Etienne and Woody Marks. Traded Kyron and Lab for Rome and ETN. What do you think? Well, Kyron just popped off, but Lad hasn't really been doing well this year. I think Rome could be a top 5 wide receiver rest of season, and ETN is going to be a solid running back. So I like that trade. In the grand scheme of things, you're getting rid of Lad McConkey, who has not performed well, and getting Rome and ETN. Kyron is usually consistent, but I like those two upsides. Cortland Sutton or Marvin Harrison Jr. This week, I'm going to go MHJ. Non-PPR, I get Judkins and Igbuka for Hampton. No. Non-PPR, I'm keeping Omari and Hampton. Yeah, Joseph, I'd hang on to Omari and Hampton in non-PPR leagues. All right, guys, any more questions? Let's see here. Well, if we do have a question, it'll come in, but if not, just going to end it here. We're going to continue questions on the TikTok live. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the BA Sports Podcast. We went through everything for week 5: starts, sits, sleepers, busts, DFS, targets, some fades, and then game by game starts and fades, and a little bit of a prediction. So thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the BA Sports Podcast. Let's get you a win in week 5. Look out for the week 5 weekly matchup analysis. You can find all my updated rankings on my website. Just search BA Sports Podcast mailer page. It should be the first page that pops up, the mailerpage.io. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you in week 6. And just to let everyone know before we go, the teams on bye again: Falcons, Bears, Packers, and Steelers. Let's get you a win this week. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. We'll catch you next Thursday for the week 6